It was a rainy night in the city. I was sitting alone in my office pondering over a case that's been troubling me for days. Vampire Survivors, a small indie game that's become a massive success on multiple platforms, and I need to know how they did it. So I took out my notebook and I looked intently at my notes about the game's story, gameplay, and input loops. As I analyzed them, I realized that Punkle, a small indie studio based in London, had indeed struck gold with their monstrous success. But how did they do it? That's what we have to find out. Join me as we sink our fangs into the investigation of the gameplay loops of Vampire Survivors and uncover the secrets that's made it so well received among the gaming community. As I delve into the story loop of this game, I couldn't help but feel a sensation of confusion. The plot was surprisingly non-existent, and with the only hint of a story being what seems to be a running joke that the vampire is never where we expect him to be. But strangely, this offbeat approach to storytelling was also humorous and even became a meme within the community. As I played on, I couldn't help but wonder, what exactly do vampires have to do with this game anyways? But it was the input loop that truly caught my attention, or rather the lack thereof. The game only offers a basic menu selection and arrow key movement with little feedback animation. It's a stark contrast to the successful indie game Pizza Tower, one of our last investigation, where the input loop is a central aspect of the game's success, with responsive and fun animation that engages the player at every button press. With no significant story or input loop, the answer to Vampire's success must lie in its core gameplay loop. It's true that the core gameplay loop of Vampire Survivor may seem simple at first, but that's precisely what makes it so addictive. The game is easy to pick up but difficult to master, with each level presenting a new challenge that requires strategic thinking and quick reflexes to overcome. As you level up and unlock new abilities, the game becomes more and more engaging, with the difficulty ramping up just enough to keep you on the edge of your seat every step of the way. One of the key factors that sets Vampire Survivors apart from other indie games is its replayability. The game is designed to be played over and over again with its roguelike elements, each playthrough presenting a new challenge and a new opportunity to hone your skills. And the fact that the game is so accessible means that it's easy to jump back into it for just one more level, even if you only have a few minutes to spare. But perhaps the biggest factor in Vampire Survivor's success is the sense of satisfaction that comes from playing the game. According to my community questioning, there's something incredibly satisfying about mowing down hordes of enemies with your trusty vampire hunter, and the fact that you're constantly leveling up and unlocking new abilities only adds to that feeling of accomplishment and progression. All in all, it is a simple but highly effective gameplay loop, and it has earned Vampire Survivors a well-deserved spot among the most popular indie games of 2022. But Vampire Survivors has a certain allure that hooks players in, and it's not just the thrill of the kill. There is a wild factor of the game that lies in its use of visual and sensory stimulation, creating an intense rush of endorphins and excitement. As a detective, I know how powerful those senses can be, and Vampire Survivors has mastered the art of stimulating them. The game's simple 2D sprites are deceptive. The focus on the gems that falls all over the screen allows the player to notice their destructiveness as they slay an almost infinite amount of undead creatures, and the more gems they collect, the greater the sense of achievement is. The use of color to stimulate the brain is also notable, especially when dealing damage to the enemies. As the number changes color, it provides a sense of progression and accomplishment, leading to an almost addictive cycle of leveling up. But it's not just the visual cues that creates a rush of excitement. The chest that contains power-ups are presented as slot machine, with an array of colors and stimulation that mimics the thrill of gambling. It's a smart tactic to keep the players engaged, as the desire to unlock the next power-up becomes almost insatiable. Finally, the smooth sense of progression is also a key factor in Vampire Survivor's success. The first level may be difficult, but as the player earns unlocks and becomes stronger, the game becomes more manageable, and the sense of accomplishment grows ever so stronger. Before you know it, you've spent hours playing, and you're a powerhouse, decimating enemies left and right. In short, Vampire Survivor's wild factor lies in its ability to stimulate the senses, create a sense of progression, and keep the players engaged with the promise of unlocking new power-ups. It's a game that's hard to put down, and once you've started playing, you may find yourself lost in its wild world for hours on end. After interviewing players and thoroughly investigating Vampire Survivors, I've come to the conclusion that this game breaks almost all the rules by having no story loop, practically no input loop, and a very bare-bone core gameplay loop. Yet, it still managed to captivate and entertain players for hours on end. The wild card that sets Vampire Survivors apart from other games is its extremely stimulating experience and strong sense of progression. As you progress through the level, you become more powerful, collecting more gems, unlocking new chests with new power-ups, and mowing down hundreds and hundreds of enemies. The game also uses colors, numbers, and other visual stimulation to create a feeling of progression and provides the player with a sense of accomplishment. Despite its simplicity, Vampire Survivors manages to keep the players engaged and entertained with its addictive gameplay loop. I personally went from playing just a few hours to spending multiple hours a day to eventually beating the game in just one sitting. It's a testament of how a game that may seem basic on the surface can still provide a thrilling and satisfying experience. In closing, I must commend Paco and their team for creating such an exceptional game. Vampire Survivors may not follow traditional gaming conventions, but it has managed to create a unique and captivating experience that has earned it all the praises it deserves. This case is close.